Hello, everyone. My name is Kate Golick, and I would like to welcome you to the Big Ten Wellness Series for faculty. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker today. This is Dr. Mary Dirks. She is a clinical professor and assistant dean for graduate practice programs at the University of Iowa's College of Nursing, and she will be presenting Harmonizing Workload. Go ahead.
Hello. Thank you, Kate, very much. Nice to see so many of you joined today. And I'm just going to give I admit right off the bat that I am not an expert on organizing or prioritizing, but, as I know many of you have probably learned some tips along the way. And so I'm just going to kind of share some strategies that I have discovered that tend to work for me, and hopefully it will work for some of you. To overall just try to decrease frustration, anxiety, and overall burnout in our work, and trying to create a little bit more balance in our lives. So I think the term work-life balance tends to be sort of a key phrase that many of us often hear about, and I think sometimes that phrase really is a bit of a misnomer. It's kind of a buzzword that we use in the workplace, but is it an empty promise? Can there really be work-life balance achieved? And often sometimes those of us that hire within the job marketplace or within academics, even give it sort of a negative connotation when people say in an interview that they're looking for something with better work-life balance. So sometimes to me that means, okay, they want to work less. So is that, it's kind of a negative can have a negative connotation, but why is that? Why can't we support someone that really wants more balance in their life? So that's why I renamed this presentation Harmonizing Workload. So bringing things together, because, when you think about balance, it is difficult to do. Take this bicycle, for instance. A bicycle in a static state, not moving at all, is really hard to balance on. And so you really need some kind of forward momentum to be able to balance well on a bicycle. So just like with our work and in our lives, we need forward momentum. We need that energy to, we can't just look at what we're doing in a stagnant state and hope to create some kind of balance. And we also want to be more effective by leaning in. So as in a bicycle, when you're turning a corner, leaning into it is also very effective and helps. So, we're just going to talk today about some topics related to balance or harmonizing our lives related to work and our personal lives. We're going to touch on procrastination, perfectionism, and then really some strategies to help us focus and increase our productivity, prioritization, and finally creating some boundaries. So I'm sure many of us are oftentimes feeling overwhelmed by all of the duties that we have to do. And especially during this time, during the pandemic, it's just been very overwhelming, I think, for many of us, having many things on our plate, or I kind of like to think of it as pots on a stove. You have certain things that you have to pay pretty close attention to. So maybe those are on the front burners for a little while, but there are also many other things in your life that can kind of simmer on the back burner. And you can kind of maybe just keep an eye on it, stir it once in a while, and things still go okay. But then there are things, if you don't pay attention to them, will boil over and can create, lots of mess and stress in your lives. And we just don't want things to get too overwhelmed and create a lot of burnout or burning on the stove. So, and oftentimes when somebody asks us, so how simple question, how are you doing? Or how is work? How many of us often say busy? And then, I often do that. I say, oh, busy, really busy. So I think sometimes we think that's glorifying, that, oh yeah, we're busy. So that's a good thing, but it also can be a very overwhelming thing. So we're going to just talk a little bit about how we can make busy less glorified and more productive. So if we think about the resources that we really have in order to manage our work and our personal lives, we have basically three things. We have time, we have energy, and then we have focus. So if we spend excessive time on any of these areas and really don't try to work with all of these resources together, then we end up having frustration, anxiety, and burnout. So if you are expending a lot of time doing something and lots of energy, but there's really no focus on where that time and energy is going, you're going to get really frustrated because things are not going to, you're not going to have the outcomes that you are expecting to see. And just like if you have a sustained period of time that you're working on something and a lot of focus, that is going to lead to burnout. I think many of us during the pandemic have experienced this. And then finally, if you exert a lot of energy and you're focusing a lot on that, but you don't have much time dedicated to doing it, then you're going to get very anxious. And this, I think, tends to happen with procrastination. Leads to a lot of anxiety. You put a lot of energy and focus into thinking about something that you need to do, but you don't put any time into it. And so with a lot of procrastination comes anxiety about it, and that also tends to be an issue with many of us. I will admit to myself being a perfectionist. So you put a lot of time and energy and focus. Or put a lot of energy and focus into how you're going to do something, but you don't dedicate the time to it because you're afraid you're not going to be perfect at it. So that causes anxiety. So the biggest impact, the best outcomes are created when you have the right amount of time, the right amount of energy, and the right amount of focus, all three working together. And that's where you have the biggest impact. So really the key that I found to having the best outcomes is focus. So really looking at and thinking about your purpose in an activity or in your work. And some authors, there's a podcast that I like to listen to and a book that I've read by Tanya Dalton. She talks oftentimes about, I have the resource at the end, but she talks often about discovering your North Star. So really figuring out why you are doing something. So why you're going to write this article or you're teaching in an academic institution. What is your purpose? And if you are very clear about figuring that out, then you're going to be more productive because things are going to align for you. So also thinking about the Live Well method, you guys probably have heard and worked within that, most likely in your wellness centers at your universities. But again, that's looking at discovering your purpose and priorities, looking at clarity of focus, and really putting your time and energies into those areas that are going to help to meet your professional or personal goals and your priorities. So if you realize that for promotion in an academic institution that publishing is a main criteria, then you may have to focus your time and energy on doing more writing and less on some of the other service obligations or even teaching more if you can, so you can help to align yourself with your goals of getting promoted. And really creating simplicity. So I talked a little bit about prioritizing, and we're going to get into a little bit more of that in a minute, but really just kind of setting some boundaries. Maybe you have a time that you create on your schedule for that particular activity of writing or refreshing a course. So whatever your goals are, but creating some boundaries, creating some structure. I oftentimes will on Friday afternoons, mark myself off as out of the office, and that's the time that I set aside for catching up on my work from the week, and maybe it's writing with a group or myself writing an article. So just creating those boundaries so you don't get things scheduled. And then really also Tanya Dalton also talks about harmonizing your white space. So that is creating some white space or some space for you to get your priorities and your objectives done. So and that means sometimes saying no to opportunities or to things that people would like you to do, because every time you say yes to something, you have to say no to something else. There's only so much time that you have. So all these things try to help with focus and productivity and achieving that harmony. Multitasking. So I used to think I was a great multitasker and I could do lots of things at the same time. And this is kind of a picture of maybe some of the days that you've experienced during the pandemic where you're, having to multitask during the day. But there's been a fair amount of research done showing that multitasking is really a myth, that there is no effective way to multitask, that it's often more time consuming, you create more errors, and you also create more anxiety for yourself. And it's often actually referred to as switch tasking. So you're switching your effort and your energies from one task to another fairly quickly, or back tasking, where you are doing something that you tried to get done earlier and while you're doing something else. And so again, it's not an effective way to be productive. So we're going to switch a little bit to prioritization. So historically, as we know, this started with, in the medical area, at least, with triaging. So you have to prioritize where you can spend your time, focus, and energy. And I like to look at it with the Eisenhower Matrix and just kind of frame that in my mind about how to filter out the unimportant things in order to create the prioritization to achieve your personal and career goals. So really just creating more space, time, and energy for those important items for you and that align with your goals. And it's really this sort of change in mindset that is going to help you. So if we look at the first square, things that are important and urgent that you do first, these may or may not align with your personal goals or your career goals, but they really are time sensitive. They might be, a report that needs to be done for the dean or something that needs to be done for a student. So oftentimes we can anticipate these things and get them done, fairly quickly and onto the next thing. But the next block that's important but not urgent, or the due later block, this is where you want to spend most of your time, and because it probably aligns most with your own personal goals and priorities. And some strategies here are try to tackle small tasks first, and then just to get some momentum going, because if you keep thinking of these big projects that you have to do and you keep kind of putting them off, procrastinating again, they're just going to create more and more anxiety. So if you get some traction and start doing some small tasks first, possibly in a day, and then you say, okay, well, this afternoon I'm going to dedicate to doing this bigger task. So again, this is where you want to spend most of your time because they most likely will align most with your priorities and goals. the box that's not important but urgent, that's oftentimes things that people other than you are finding that they need your help with. So they might be the loudest. They might be the most pressing for other people, drop-in meetings, emails, texts, phone calls. So there are things that you probably have to stop what you're doing and help them do it, but they're not that important to you. There oftentimes is a lot of guilt for putting things off or delegating, but we have to try not to do that. I know I have a hard time feeling guilty about delegating certain things that people ask me to do, but in order to make this whole thing work, you really have to try to delegate those things if you can. And then the last one is fairly easy, eliminate. So things that are not important and not urgent. These are really time wasters for most of us. Time on social media, internet, binge watching TV. Just try, of course, there's going to be some times when you're going to want to do those things, but try for the most part to eliminate those things from your space so that you can achieve the goals and priorities that you have set for yourself. And so I guess just in conclusion, I just want to say that, we need to not be too hard on ourselves, and we need to take small steps to create this harmony in our work and our personal lives by creating some boundaries, creating some time and some white space when you can get the things done that are in alignment with your own career goals, personal goals. This is actually my little grandson, Henry. I thought it portrayed well some self-care, doing his little downward dog, but he's a family, time is also a really big priority for many of us. So we want to be able to have some space for family time and give them some of our time as well, and have time for downtime and to recharge, because if you are burnt out for work, that you're no good to anyone. So you do need to create some time for your family, but also for yourself, and sleep, adequate sleep, nutrition, social activities, all the hobbies that you like to do, and physical activity. And I know that's easier said than done. And so we just continue to try to continue to work on that so that we can be better for ourselves and for our family and our work. The old saying of, put your oxygen mask on first before you help your family member if you're going down in an airplane is really true. I think we really have to concentrate on taking care of ourselves, and also just prioritizing and knowing when things are important to you and to meeting your career goals and your own priorities. Here's a list of some of the resources. I talked about the Tanya Dalton podcast, which are free and very informative to listen to. And then she also has a book, The Joy of Missing Out. And there's a couple others there about strategies for overcoming procrastination and focusing in a distracted world. So that is all I have, but I am happy to take questions. We seem to have a few minutes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dirks. So we do have one question. So it says, students often ask me for references and recommendation letters, which take time, energy, and focus. What are some ways to make this process more efficient, or when should I kindly decline?
That's a great question. And I have gotten a lot of requests for those as well. What I like to do is create a template. There might be a template for undergraduate students, graduate students in a particular track, or maybe it's a postmaster's DNP student. So I have a template, and then I use that and I tweak it. So it's a lot more time effective and efficient to So have a template to start out with. I do the same thing with, I do a lot of external reviews for other faculty members from other universities. And I always start with a template and then, and then update it or tweak it related to that person. But it does, just having that saves a lot of time. And you can say no. I mean, I hate to do it too, but if I've already done, an external review for that month, and I do quite a few, I say, I'm really sorry. I've already overcommitted, and they understand. People understand if you can't, and they can ask someone else. And maybe you can even help them find someone else if you know another faculty member that might be willing to do it. You wouldn't want to give them their name, but you may want to ask that person if it's okay to give them their name first.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions? You can put them into the chat or the Q&A. If we do not have any more, thank you again so much for being part of this. And we do ask that you complete a short evaluation for attending today, just to give us some feedback. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.